are back, and now, as promised, we have Dr. Mary Barbera with us. Mary fell into the autism world in the late 1990s when her firstborn son Lucas was diagnosed with autism one day before his third birthday. Now, Mary has been transformed over the last 2 decades from an overwhelmed and confused parent, in her own words, to a board-certified behavior analyst and best-selling author. Her book, The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders, has sold more than 50,000 copies. And she also fell into the world of online marketing, launching her first online course in early 2015. And since then, she has created 3 online courses and a monthly membership program. She's on a mission to turn autism around for 2 million by 2020. And so, welcome to the show, Mary. Quite a list of accomplishments.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to meet you, Shannon and Nancy. Happy to be here.
It's our pleasure. We're thrilled to have you. You've got a new podcast that just started last month. Tell us a little bit about Turn Autism Around.
Yeah, so I've been in the online space for a few years, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, mostly about online marketing, but there's a few behavior analyst podcasts that I listen to, and I just decided in December, you know what, I'm on a big mission to turn autism around for 2 million by 2020, and I have to reach more people. So I decided that I was going to start a podcast. It's mostly for parents and professionals. They don't have to be behavioral professionals or even educational professionals. I'm also a registered nurse. I'm married to a physician, so I have interest in training medical professionals, educational professionals, social workers, whoever wants to learn about autism. I'm providing this podcast weekly. It comes out every Tuesday, and you can subscribe on iTunes. It's called Turn Autism Around. So far, the feedback has been great. 5-star reviews and lots of people helping me spread the word.
And what do you mean by turn autism around in 2 million by 2020?
Right. So even the name Turn Autism Around, I know there's a lot of people that, for my son, I have a son who's 22. His name is Lucas, and he continues with moderate to severe autism. He remains pretty impaired. He needs supervision. And so for him, turning autism around means that I'm continuing to provide him safe environments, people that understand his needs, programs that help him increase his communication so he can be happier. So for Lucas and for older kids with pretty significant delays, turning autism around looks different than a very young child with new diagnosis of autism. I've worked with many young children who started out as looking really impaired, and with proper intensive behavioral treatment, they've gone on and to be included in general education environments. A few of them have lost their diagnosis, or a few of them that I know are going to college or learning to drive. So turning autism around really just means making things better, having each child reach his or her fullest potential, be as safe, as independent, and as happy as possible. And that's what I mean about turning autism around. So it doesn't have to be a complete turnaround. And in most cases, it's not a complete turnaround, but it's just making everyone's lives better. And it's not just focusing on the kids and their deficits and programming. It's also focusing, I want the podcast to be helping parents and professionals also feel good, feel happy, lead happier lives, be less stressed. And so some of the episodes are going to be on self-care and how do we make sure that we don't get depressed. If we get depressed, how do we have realistic but hopeful goals for our kids, for ourselves, and so that is also a big focus that I want to take with this podcast.
And tell us a little bit about, it comes out weekly, but each week do you have a different topic? Yes. Tell us a little bit about the format of the show.
Right. So each week we do one episode. And so the first episode number one, is my journey, and also as a parent first, then how I got into being a behavior analyst. Then I became an author. Then I became an online marketer. So my journey and 15 lessons that I've learned over the past 2 decades. So that's episode number one. I would start there for sure because, a lot of what I say and even how I interview people is all based on my unique background with all of these different hats that I wear in the autism world. And then other episodes include some interviews. My first interview was episode number 3, where I interview Kelsey, who's a single mom of 2 boys on the spectrum. She did my online course a couple of years ago and really turned autism around for her older son, who was only 2.5 when she found my course. But he was banging his head up to 100 times a day. She had to take him out on a leash and a harness. And now, over the past 2 years, first through just my online courses, and then she was able to get providers in there to help her. She's able to turn his world around and turn her own life around. And then her younger son was diagnosed, and so she knew right away how to teach him language, how to advocate for him. So while Kelsey and her boys are still, deeply in the autism world, she's managed to turn her life around. I also have some interviews with some professionals, like Dr. Megan Miller is on next week's podcast episode. I'm interviewing Amanda Kelly, who is Behavior Babe. I don't know if you have ever heard of her.
Yes, she's been on the show.
Oh,
yes.
She's been a guest?
Yes.
Okay, great. So she's a friend of mine, so I interviewed her for an upcoming episode. So I am going to have a mixture of solo shows. I just recorded a show, a podcast episode on keeping kids with autism safe, which is a huge, huge issue. So it'll be a variety of topics and a mixture between solo shows and interviews.
Wonderful. You have such a unique perspective.
Mm-hmm, definitely, coming as a parent and as a BCBA. Tell us how they can find the podcast.
So my website has all my information about my free resources, weekly video blogs, my podcast. So marybarbera.com is where you can find all the information about my free resources as well as my paid courses. And you can also search your podcast app on iTunes for Turn Autism Around. I would love it if you subscribe to the podcast. That helps with the algorithm. I'm learning all this stuff about doing podcasts, but if you like what you hear, give me a 5-star rating and review. That also helps to have iTunes really feature it, recommend it. I've also been doing weekly video blogs, which is on my website as well as on my YouTube channel. And I've been doing that for 2 years. So whenever you have a topic, like if you are on this listening or watching and you think, well, I wonder what Mary has to say about stimming or scripting, just Google Mary Barbera stimming, Mary Barbera sleep, Mary Barbera whatever. Chances are good that I've done a video on it, and you can get to it right away.
Okay.
And you can hear that little snippet, and hearing that little snippet of something you're struggling with might really help you take action and start to see how you can begin to make strides in turning things around for you and your family or your clients.
Right. Very good.
Dr. Barbera, since we have you, I'd love to get your perspective as a mom. And you were talking about how you have people that you have helped and that they've gotten there early and they've gotten everything that they needed and they've progressed, sometimes to the point where they lose their diagnoses. And yet that was not the story for you. And so often I see that one of the many tears in the fabric of the autism community is this, the tale of two cities that people arrive in with autism. And you see that intimately on a daily basis. Maybe if you could share some of your wisdom about how is that for you as a mom and as a practitioner, and what do you see and what helps you?
parents have very young children with just showing signs of autism, I think it's really important to offer them hope that that recovery is possible. Now, some of the older studies, like the original Lovaas study, show 47%. Some of the more recent studies show 4% of kids actually recover from autism. I also know kids that are largely recovered, but they still have some issues. So it's not black and white, recovery, not recovery. And the other thing I learned over the years is if you are proactively treating children with behavioral therapy as well as other therapies that might work, um, you may not end up with a child that is independent or recovered, like my son Lucas, who still requires a lot. But it's never a waste of time to teach kids to get to the next level, whatever that next level is. Like I had one of the parents who's taken my online course. She said, she wrote in, she had a couple of kids on the spectrum, a young son who was making all kind of gains, but then she had an 11 or 12-year-old, and she wrote in, she's like, my 11-year-old just had his first bowel movement on the toilet in 11 years. Like to him, that is a major milestone. And so we have to celebrate whatever the next step is. We have to strive. We just can't go like, oh, they're low functioning, just push them aside. They're a child or a young adult or whatever. They have their strengths and their needs. They're not high functioning or low functioning. I did a podcast episode all about high functioning and low functioning, and how I used to think of it as a black and white issue. It's very gray. And even with my typically developing son who's in college, he's third year of college, his name is Spencer. I want the same things for Spencer that I do for Lucas. I want both of my boys, every child that I know with and without autism, to be as safe as possible, as independent as possible, and as happy as possible. And so I think sometimes when people hear behavioral therapy or ABA, they get like, oh, I don't want to force my child. I am all about getting everybody as positive and as happy as possible, because we only have one life to live and we have to make the most of it.
Right.
Amen
Very
to that.
good.
And we only briefly addressed your book, but I see that it's up on the shelf behind you. The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders. Where can people get that?
That's available at Amazon. We published this book. It's with Jessica Kingsley Publishers, published in 2007, so it is 12 years old, which I can't even believe it. I wrote it from my perspective as a parent as well as a behavior analyst, and it has sold more than 50,000 copies. It's in 10 languages. I had no idea it was going to be this popular. Get it on Amazon. You can search for it on my website. I have some more information about it. It is really unique because throughout the book, in the first and last chapter, are more my perspective, how I was in denial and how I coped, and then at the end are kind of all my soapboxes, all my lessons learned. But then all throughout the middle is more of a step-by-step, like break a cookie into 10 pieces and get the child to request cookie over and over again. There's even a chapter on potty training, which I tend to have some expertise in. But, I had no idea that it was going to be so popular. But what really thrills me is that people without any background, lay people, can read this book on a plane. It's an easy read for lay people who have no knowledge of autism. And it's also used in graduate level ABA text, as a text, as a required text, and in some undergrad programs as well. So I think it really does a nice job of bridging the gap between people that have no knowledge and then people who have a lot of knowledge but don't know really how to break things down so that people can understand what the important parts of ABA are.
Well,
Okay.
you've given so many resources to the
Right.
community. So again, we want to have you say your website again, and we'll put it up on the screen. But for people who are listening instead of watching, Traven,
Yes.
can you put it back up there? And Mary, say it again, please.
So marybarbera.com. If you can't remember how to spell my last name, just try your best. Or you can even just search Mary Autism, and I will come right up as the first option. But there's a ton of free resources. Check out all my video blogs and check out my website, marybarbera.com.
Thank
All
you
right.
so
Thank you
much
so
for
much
all
for
that
joining
you do.
us, all your great resources.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's great. It's great what you're doing to get the word out about a variety of subjects in the autism world. I'd be happy to come back again in the
We'd love
future.
that.
Thank
We'd
you,
love
Mary.
that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
So you want to take a quick break and then come back
Yes,
and
let's
talk
take a
about
break and
tomorrow's show,
yes,
what you've
we
got
will.
going on.
Stick
Okay,
with
great.
us. Bye-bye.